Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Facebook live broadcast. I'm Steve Altishan, Director of Client Partnerships here at Pacific Cascade Family Law. And today we're here with student parent coach Jeannine Jannot to discuss how our high achieving culture can result in a disintegrating student, and also how co-parents can work together to help them. So before we start in, Jeannine, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on today to talk live with your people. It's awesome. So I'm Jeannine Jannot. I live in the Atlanta, Georgia area. I'm a student and parent coach. My background is school psychology, and I have a doctorate in child and developmental psychology. But most importantly, I am the mom to three awesome kids, and they range in ages from 25 to 18. So I spent a lot of time, at home as a mom with them. And when my youngest was an elementary school student and my middle child was in middle school and my son, the oldest, was in high school, I started teaching college. So that's what got me looking at what I call the disintegrating student, because I was seeing really, really stressed out kids who were really overwhelmed and didn't have a lot of skills. And that's what actually led me to start my academic coaching and also write The Disintegrating Student.
Well, I like it. And the stuff I read was just really stimulating, and it just feels on point. As having two kids that are just a little bit older than yours, a lot of the stuff you talked about, I was going, oh yeah. So, when we started to plan today, we talked about some of the problems you see as a student parent coach that kids are having in school. And a couple of the issues you raised were, as you said, the concept of a disintegrating student and how today's, high achievement culture just can exacerbate that situation. And thus came the title for today's Facebook Live. So let's start in with the concept of a disintegrating student. What is it? What causes it, and how does it impact our kids?
So what it is, and I was surprised to see this student when I started my academic coaching, these were really bright, high-achieving kids who were falling apart. So oftentimes identified as gifted, sometimes having some other, learning challenges, ADHD, dyslexia, things like that. But by and large, just the kids who had gone through elementary school, maybe even middle school, not really cracking a book, showing up to class, getting good grades, getting their homework done on the bus and in class. And then all of a sudden, they kind of hit a wall. And I call that the rigor tipping point. So there's this point where they just become overwhelmed and they start seeing some inconsistencies in their grades. So if they were predominantly an A student, they're starting to get some Bs and maybe even a C thrown in there. And this is really disorienting and unsettling to students when it happens to them. And it also causes a whole bunch of issues, as you can imagine, in the family. And there's probably a lot of people listening right now going, oh my gosh, that sounds like my kid. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. And it's happened to my own children. I think it might have happened to me too. I'm not.
Well, you know what? That sounds like my own kids.
Yeah.
So this tipping point kind of thing you're talking about, and what kind of falls from that? What comes from that? I mean, if I kind of say, hey, what's happening? And the kids kind of are like, oh, how's that work?
Well, that's probably exactly what would happen. So when the grades start to become inconsistent, obviously that's when parents take notes, like, well, what's going on? And the kid says, I don't know. And they're not lying. They really don't understand what's happening. They're just doing what they've been doing, which is usually not a lot because they're really bright. They've never needed to study. They've never needed study skills, time management, organization, all those things. And they don't understand that that's the missing piece. So with the rigor tipping point, I've seen it happen at different stages for different students. So it was really common to see like that 8th grade, 10th grade, and maybe the first semester of college being pretty standard rigor tipping points for students. Although where I live now, with the rigor is ticking downwards so much more into like the middle school years. So a lot of 7th and 8th graders are starting to take high school level courses in, just math or science or ELA. And what's happening is they're going into their freshman year taking sophomore and junior level courses that freshman year. And they are really struggling because there's enough kind of angst built into the transition into high school, and you throw in intense rigor and just being overwhelmed with all the responsibilities that come with being a high school student. So freshman year has become a real big rigor tipping point. And what's really unfortunate about when the rigor tipping point hits these kids is that this is when miscommunication and misunderstandings start happening between the kids and their parents. So, after the parents has asked and the kid says, I don't know, the parent starts figuring out in their own head, oh, my kid's lazy. They don't care about school anymore. This is in their control. And I think as parents, we think that because we've offered help. We've said, can we call the teacher? Can I have a meeting with the teacher? Do I need to email the teacher? Do you need a tutor? And the kid says, no, I've got this. They don't got this. And in their head, the kid is thinking, my parents care more about my grades than they do me, which isn't true, but we do talk an awful lot at our kids about academics. I mean, probably 70% of the times we're talking to them, we're talking about something school related. So it makes sense that they think that. They also think they're not smart anymore, because these are kids who've internalized being a smart kid, and now they're getting feedback that's suggesting maybe you're not so smart. They think it's only happening to them. And they really are worried about disappointing their parents. So that it's just setting up a lot of conflict.
Well, so do you think it's part of it? It sounds like it's almost because they were so smart and it was so easy that they didn't learn maybe some of the fundamental skills, like you said, that kids who needed to learn those early, because they didn't have that just sort of intuitive thing going on. I remember my son would, in math, he would just do the answers. And I'd say, well, hold it, where's the this plus that and this, that? And he goes, no, that's the answer. And, that only carries you so far, I guess.
Right. And teachers want to see the work, show the work.
Yeah.
And this is the problem, because again, these students are really bright and they can oftentimes not show the work and get to the right answer. But what I found is they are, they have some skill deficits and counterproductive behaviors in the areas of time management, organization, good study skills and habits, mindset, how they're thinking about their education and learning. And also the things we all struggle with, sleep, screens, and stress are things that cause us all to struggle. Yeah. So I always start with, because the good news is this disintegration has nothing to do with how smart they are. Nothing at all. It has everything to do with the fact they've never needed these skills. They were always able to compensate because they were so smart. Now they just need to build these skills in. The trick is that they understand what these skills are. And probably the parents have said, here's how you do a time management system. Here's how you organize this. And the kid gets it and actually even acknowledges it would probably be helpful. But I think most of us parents out there would go, yeah, but they didn't do it. And the reason for that, and it's taken me a while in my coaching to kind of get to this, reason for that is the mindset piece. So because they have identified so much as being a bright kid, they find this all very threatening to their self-esteem and their kind of identity as being a smart kid. So they are not going to ask for help. They're going to resist it. They're going to avoid challenges. They're going to self-sabotage, all these kinds of things to protect their self-esteem. So that's the piece that has to be dealt with first.
Yeah. And that kind of slips into the other concept we talked about, and I really, really thought this was interesting when we talked about it. It's today's high achievement culture. I remember seeing it, kind of starting almost when we were in school, but it's nothing like it is today. So can you talk about what that is and how that just impacts all this?
Yeah, it is the thing. So the high stakes, high pressure achievement culture is what's driving this. It's what's making educators teach the way they're teaching, and students, learn the way they're learning, and parents parent the way they're parenting. It's because the message in our high stakes achievement culture that it's been building for the last at least 30 years. I mean, I graduated high school in 82, and I think I was kind of at the beginning of this all starting to happen. And what success is in the achievement culture that we have created is data. So our students feel like data points because what matters to them and what equals success is the grade, the GPA, the standardized test score, check the box, check the box, check the box to get into this college. And that has a lot of, the downstream consequences of that are just so many, because, I think of myself as a parent, I live and breathe this stuff. And it is so hard not to let the pressures associated with that definition of success for your kid be an issue. Like, when you're talking about, should you take 2 APs or 4 APs? Do you need to have a 3.5, or do you need a 4 plus? These are the kinds of, issues that are coming up in our families, and it's hard.
Yeah, I totally get that. I was talking to my daughter once, and she told me, my GPA is now this. I said, well, that's impossible. and she goes, no, these other people have this. I mean, it's kind of crazy. There's pressure. I remember when we talked about that, you said that really can also impact their feel that they're not controlling themselves. They're sort of out of control. They're being controlled by others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one of the biggest issues I've seen, and particularly since, COVID has been an issue, is motivation in our students is just at an all-time low. And a lot of that comes from, for human beings to feel motivated, there's 3 things we really need. We need to feel like we're in control so that we have some autonomy in a situation. We need to feel like we have some competency, like I can handle this, and some connectedness. So this means something to me. And when you think about school and those 3 things, control, competency, and connection, that's really not there for so many of our students. So, what our students are doing is they are just going through and checking the box by and large. So the cheating, I think every parent is aware of just how rampant cheating is, particularly once kids get into middle school. They cheat through tech. They have all kinds of ways of cheating, and it's just very well tolerated and accepted, at least at certain levels. So I'm not saying every student cheats on big unit tests, but certainly a lot of students are helping each other with homeworks and projects, and some of it's very well intentioned, because they'll look at a friend who his parents going to freak out if they don't get an A on this thing. And so they don't want their friend to go through all this stress. And so they help their friend out by giving them the answers or doing some of the work for them or sharing their work, which, it makes me feel good. Our students are watching out for each other, but at the same time, what's happening to their learning and their curiosity in this process? I don't feel like the majority of our students are connected to learning and understanding that it's okay to figure things out and make mistakes. It's just, that's not the culture they're in.
Yeah. And like you said, I think if the kids just for whatever reason are prepared, they kind of can turn to those things, and
right.
That, then you end up where you end up. So you talked about, again, the concept of all this pressure, and I would imagine, and high achievement, and having to take the SATs 50 times and all that stuff. I would imagine if their parents are going through a divorce, or, splitting up or moving away from each other, that concept, while being bombarded by high achievement culture, probably doesn't mix very well. Because I know that, parents, when they get divorced, their communications with each other becomes strained. And, when they try to work out issues with their own kids, especially when they're doing custody, parenting time, and that kind of stuff, it's really difficult for them to, continually work together and focus on what the kids are going through. And so sometimes it becomes a battle over who's controlling the kids more, So what's important? What can parents do to try to understand really what their kids are going through in the first place? Because I think that's the start. And then, find a way to help them.
Yeah, so, divorce is an additional change, which any change is a stressor that's placed on a family. And, divorced or not, a family really to address what's going on as far as the academic piece of it and how that plays out at home, communication is just the key. And so I mentioned earlier, a lot of our communication as parents is just around, did you turn the thing in? What grade did you get? Do you remember you have this thing due on? That's how we're communicating to our kids about school. And I think it will be really helpful for parents to listen more and talk less. So we want to engage our kids in conversations where we're being really curious and not judgmental and not defensive, but we want to hear. And I think we saw a lot of this happen last year during the pandemic, where I think parents got a bigger kind of eyeful of what education really is today and saw what their kids were experiencing. But I think we need to kind of build on that and listen to what our kids are telling us. So often, when our kids try to tell us things, we jump in and we try to problem solve, and we're not listening to understand. So listening really empathetically, which means kind of, I have to get out of my 57-year-old brain and jump into my 18-year-old's brain and hear what she's saying from her perspective. I might have 10 things I could just shoot off right away. I'm a problem solver. So let me just tell you, did you do this? Why did you do this? This will probably work. Easy peasy, and we're done. That's not what she wants. That's not what our kids want. They just want us to listen. And so that's actually incredibly powerful, super, super hard to do, at least for me. But I told my daughter, I said, you just have to stop me. Like, I'm recognizing that I do this. I'm recognizing that you don't appreciate it and it's not helpful to you. But my instinct, I love you and I want to help. So sometimes that overrides my thinking brain to stop and listen. So you have to tell me, you have to put your hand up and go, just listen, please. And that really worked well.
First reaction for so many parents, if, a kid says, I'm having trouble with this teacher, is, I'm going to call that teacher and yell at them. That's probably not the right, first response. And the kind of opening up and communicating, and you talked about your thinking brain, and I know we talked about our 57, our 68-year-old brains aren't the same as a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old brain, and that difference makes a difference, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And I mean, our kids' brains are hot and they're hot on emotion. And that's because the thinking part of the brain right here behind your forehead is not fully mature until they're in their late 20s. So, but their emotional brain has been mature since the second they were born. So when they become emotional, as they often do, they can escalate very, very quickly. Obviously, I mean, sometimes we see that as parents where you're just like, what just happened?
I remember that. So you also, I remember talking about, making things a habit. Don't not just one-time things, and kind of as you coach, and like you said, you're a parent student coach. So I'm assuming you talk to both parents and students.
I do.
What what sort of tips do you give parents, especially um, on how not only they should just do some things, but maybe even how they end up finally defining success, because that's always where everyone wants to reach.
Right. So, we were talking about the achievement culture, and it needs to change. And I think we're starting very, very slowly to make that shift into something where we're redefining success to mean, learning, growth, resilience, curiosity. I think we're moving in that direction. It's like turning a cruise ship, though. It's going to be super, super slow. It's a cultural shift.
Yeah.
So we don't just go out and say, okay, starting tomorrow, this is how it's going to be. But what we do have control over, and I think it's so important for parents to think about, what do we personally have control over? We do have control over what happens in our family and how we define success in our family. So my advice to parents is, sit down with your kids and have the very honest conversation around, okay, so this is the reality. If you want to go to this college, it looks like these data points are necessary, this GPA, this many APs, et cetera, et cetera. Is that reasonable for you? Is that what you want? Are you willing to do the things? Or how do we want to define success for you in our family? And be okay with that, and to repeat that conversation many, many, many times, because if we say things just once to our kids, it doesn't really stick. And they don't really believe us. It really does have to be sort of it almost has to become the family culture of what's important to us. And that happens when we continually repeat, revisit, and talk about the things that are important to us, what we're valuing in our family.
It kind of sounds like, not making getting the A on the test the definition of success.
That's how I defined it with my youngest. We sat down and I was like, for me, success is you graduate and go to the college you want to go to. I'm not really going to concern myself with what your GPA and all those things are. You're old enough to decide where you want to be going and then do the things you need to do to get there. Now, it was dicey, boy. It was a roller coaster ride. And there, right up till the end, I was like, are you actually going to graduate, girl? She did. And magna cum laude, she ended up pulling it out, but it wasn't easy and it wasn't pretty. But I think we have to put a lot of trust into our kids that they'll get there. We just have this, again, kind of based on fear, this desire of going from, A to Z in a straight line. And we have little tolerance to see our kids, do the spirally, like, I have to do it this way to get there. And our kids are uncomfortable with that too. But if you think about your own life, I'm guessing you probably didn't do a straight line A to Z. I know I swirled around there for a while, and all those things brought me to where I am today. And I'm incredibly grateful, but it was never particularly obvious at the time. So I think, for parents to kind of keep that in mind and build up our tolerance to see our kids be frustrated, not always get what they want, maybe have to deal with some of those kind of negative consequences, but work their way through it so that they learn they can handle it. That is such an important thing, and that they were in control. That's huge.
So what about the parents? They've got their own high levels of stress, burnout, again, if they're going through a divorce and they're having, their stress. Are any of these things they should talk to the kids about? Or is that one of those things you hide because you don't want to make your kids more stressful?
Well, I think we do a disservice to our kids if we don't live out loud to at least a certain extent, because if our kids are looking at us and think we've got this all buttoned up, then they get it in their head. That's the expectation. I can't struggle. I can't make mistakes. I have to have this all buttoned up too. Not reasonable for our kids, not reasonable for us. So I think the more we show, again, we're modeling, we're saying, you know, I'm doing self-care because I want to be the best mom I can be, showing up here for you. And that means I need to spend time with my friends. That means I need to get good rest. That means asking for what I need, and that's not selfish. And I think when we do that as parents, we are teaching our kids through our own actions, you know, how to cope and how to be resilient. So I think it's hugely important that we address our own burnout. We take the breaks we need. We ask for what we need, because we're showing our kids then how to do it. And giving them permission to do it.
It kind of, what it feels also like you're building trust with each other. It's like, not only is it important that, you know, your kid trusts you, but that you trust your kid.
Absolutely. And being vulnerable with our kids, I mean, that's one of the hardest lessons I think I learned as an adult, was how to, you know, coming myself out of kind of that fixed mindset, sort of disintegrating student kind of thing, where being defensive in my self-esteem, being tied up around some things, and being willing to be honest and vulnerable in those areas and kind of come clean as, oh, I don't really know what I'm doing, or I'm struggling, or I've made a mistake. If we can do that out loud for our kids, boy, it just changes the relationship, especially if we add some good communication in there, and we become, you know, especially as they become teenagers and stuff, we can be more like partners, you know, in the relationship, instead of this kind of power struggle conflict that often ends up happening instead.
So as parents, you know, we're going to try to do all these things to make it better and to help make it better. And, you know, but there's got to be, you know, some pitfalls that in trying to do our best, you know, we may end up doing some things that are counterproductive.
Yeah, we do. But it comes from a place of love.
Yeah.
I've done it a million times. I probably did it yesterday. It's very well intentioned, but the love can turn to fear pretty quickly, especially when we're being pressured by the achievement culture to kind of do things a certain way. So I think the biggest thing that we do is we probably help more than our kids need us to or want us to, and we micromanage. So again, when we micromanage and get into their business and we're checking on their grades and doing all those kinds of things, the subtle message we're sending to our kids is, you can't handle it. I need to be in this mix. And again, that just takes control away from them. And so they kind of fall into that learned helplessness kind of place of, well, maybe I can't handle it. Or they become entitled, thinking, well, you need to handle everything for me. So micromanaging backfires. It doesn't work. And I think anybody who's listening right now, if you think about all the times that you've done it, and we all have, how many times has it actually worked for you? Yeah. I mean, it usually makes things worse, because what happens is when we get in there and micromanage, our kids double down and don't do it just because we said to, or we want them to. And so it truly does backfire. So, you know, when we give our kids control and we take that deep breath and step back and hope that they'll do it, they will surprise us more often than not. And they will make mistakes and they will mess up. There is no doubt. But that is how human beings learn. They will get their biggest life lessons, and it will mean so much more for them in developing their character, their responsibility, when they have those opportunities to fail safely while they're in middle school and high school, before we send them out in the world where it's not so gracious and not everybody's taking, you know, micromanaging their life for them, and it's on them, and they get incredibly overwhelmed when they're starting to get negative feedback from the world that you're not doing it right, or you made a mistake, and they fall apart again. So we're doing them a disservice if we're not giving them that chance earlier safely.
Yeah. I mean, that seems like, especially as they get older and more into high school, and college is coming up, and you're doing everything for them, and then they go off to college, and it's like, so how do I wash my socks? I mean, kind of a thing. They just
Yeah, I mean, you just got to evaluate the stakes. So the earlier you can start it, I mean, the stakes are going to be the lowest, like in middle school. If you can start then, they get higher in high school, but they are the highest once the kids graduate and go off to that next experience.
Yeah. Wow. Unfortunately, it looks like our time is running out. 30 minutes just goes by. Before we wrap up, though, Jeannine, I do want to ask you to let folks listening know how they can learn more about you.
Well, I have a website, JeannineJannot.com, that has information about my book, which is available any place books are sold. The Disintegrating Student, Struggling But Smart, Falling Apart, and How to Turn It Around. My coaching is on there. My social media connections are on there. I have some parent tip pages. I also do a newsletter once a month you could sign up for, which are just my thoughts about
They're
all
great
this stuff.
thoughts. I read them. They're great thoughts. The November one, I'm going, wow, this is really good.
Yeah, thank you.
I take it you can do your coaching remotely.
I can.
I love it. Okay, that does wrap up our discussion today. And again, thank you so much, Jeannine, for joining us today. You provided great insight. It was, again, just really insightful to hear about this high achieving culture situation. Why a disintegrating student isn't a failure. And, kind of how co-parents can work together for them. So thank you.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Oh, always. And please feel free to come again. And you know what? I want to thank everybody else who tuned in today to join us on our Facebook Live. As always, if anyone has any questions on today's topic or how to get in contact with Jeannine, post them here. We'll make sure to get back to you or hook you up with Jeannine. Until then, stay safe. Have a great day.